Tonight, the Deputy Prime Minister faces calls for her resignation as she admits she didn't pay enough tax. In an exclusive interview with Sky News, Angela Rayner claimed she was given incorrect advice about how much stamp duty to pay and says she talked to her family about resigning.
What did you think about just packing it in rather than having to do this now?
I spoke to my family about it. I spoke to my ex-husband, who has been an incredibly supportive person.
Well, she's now referred herself to the government standards watchdog. The Prime Minister gave her his full support, but the opposition called on her to go.
She has now referred herself to the independent adviser. That is the right thing to do.
I remember when the Prime Minister said that tax evasion is a criminal offence and should be treated as all other fraud.
She was so vocal in attacking opposing politicians when she was in opposition that she can't stand up and say, I'm the biggest hypocrite in the land.
So can Angela Rayner survive the upcoming investigation? We'll bring you that full interview with Beth Rigby and all the political reaction. Also tonight, after the comedy writer Graeme Linehan was arrested over social media posts, Keir Starmer says the police should focus on serious crime, and Nigel Farage says the UK has turned into North Korea. Well, no limits on free speech tonight with Saeed Abbasi and Luke Sullivan, who can say exactly what they want over the next hour. It's Wednesday, I'm Sophy Ridge live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. One of the first principles of politics is that if you're deciding how much tax everyone else should pay, you've got to pay the correct amount of tax yourself. And today, Angela Rayner has confirmed that she's broken that fundamental principle. In an interview with Beth Rigby, she admitted not paying enough stamp duty on a property in Hove. Now, there are a few important things to say. Firstly, she says she received the wrong advice, and as soon as she realised, she contacted HMRC and also referred herself to the ministerial watchdog. And look, the case is also more complicated because it involved a trust that Angela Rayner and her ex-husband set up to provide for her son, who has lifelong disabilities. That's why the Prime Minister is standing by her. It's also why she's received some support from political opponents, like the Lib Dem leader Ed Davey. But even with that sympathy, it is still hard to escape that first principle of politics. You know, it can't be one rule for them and one rule for everyone else. You've got to pay the right amount of tax. Angela Rayner's political future may now hinge on whether she can provide evidence of the faulty advice she received and also prove that she fully disclosed everything about the trust at the time. And then, look, maybe it's time for a wider debate about stamp duty and a tax system so complicated that not even our politicians understand it. Well, we can speak now to the person who conducted that interview with Angela Rayner. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, is here. Beth, it was an extraordinary interview, kind of engrossing interview. You could see how emotional she was during it. But it is a big political problem, right? What's your take on it?
Look, I agreed with a lot of what you said at the top there, Sophie, because, look, it was a very emotional interview. When I got into the room, she came in, I could see that she was upset. And I could see, because I'd had the statement a few minutes before we started the interview, so not much time to prep, yeah. But I could see that she had admitted wrongdoing, she'd referred herself to the ethics advisor, and she had also contacted HMRC. And as you said, she was talking about her complicated family matters, and she was talking about the fact that she had received incorrect advice initially. She'd then contacted an expert and been given different advice. And this was all about going to a family court to get permission, actually, to put this stuff into the public domain, which she then had to discuss with her ex-husband and her teenage children. OK, so you can imagine, as a politician, but also as a mum, she had come into that interview and she'd been through the ringer in terms of what had been going on. So I normally see her as a very robust politician. You've interviewed her as well, but this was a different Angela Rayner that sat in front of me today. So how did I find it? And, you know, what's going to come from it? At the heart of this, for all the complicated family arrangements, it's the Deputy Prime Minister and the Housing Minister that has underpaid property tax, and that is at the heart of this. I think the big question is she can understand, she knows how serious it is. I think that she probably weighed up whether it was worth disclosing this, whether she wanted to disclose private family matters or whether she was going to resign. I think her family wanted her to fight. She says that she wanted to put everything in the public domain so that people can understand, in her words, that she made an honest mistake, that she wasn't trying to dodge tax. She's very clear about that in the interview. But as you said in your opening thought there, this is out of her control now. This depends on the ethics advisor, whether she can prove that in good faith she thought she paid the correct amount of tax on the Hove property, because the issue is whether it was her main home. She paid £40,000 in tax, and as a second home, £30,000, she should have paid £70,000. So it's all really resting on the Prime Minister's ethics advisor and whether he thinks that she broke the ministerial code. I think if he finds that she did, it's very difficult for Keir Starmer to try and defend her position. Boris Johnson did defend some of his ministers when they were found to have broken the ministerial code. He didn't ask them to resign. So I think her fate rests on that. But there's also the court of public opinion. And as you noted in your opening thought, she has been so critical of other politicians over tax affairs and very unforgiving. And so she will find herself under intense political attack. I think what's interesting is at the moment the Prime Minister's clearly backing her, colleagues are clearly backing her, and she has really laid herself on the line there and admitted the mistakes and almost sort of pleaded forgiveness and saying, look, it was an honest mistake. Whether it's enough to save her political career, Sophie, I just say it's very up in the air at the moment. But should we have a listen to that interview?
Let's listen. It's definitely worth listening to.
Deputy Prime Minister, you've been accused of dodging a £40,000 tax bill on your new home on the South Coast. You said it was your main home, while also claiming your constituency home in Ashton was your main home for other purposes. Do you just want to clear this up? What's going on?
Yeah, first of all, Beth, it's been quite a distressing time for my family. I have a court order that was in place around confidentiality regarding my son, my family and my divorce proceedings that happened in 2023, and therefore wasn't able to give a full account of the circumstances of our complex living arrangements. That order was lifted last night. I applied to have that order lifted so that I could give people the information. In 2020, my son had an award, and a trust was set up by the court to deal with his finances as part of that award with a legal trustee. And in 2023, when me and my husband divorced, the decision was, because that home was adapted to support my son who has lifelong disabilities as a result of that injury that occurred to him, that trust was set up and they decided that they would take on the property so that me and my husband could have a nesting arrangement where we could provide for my child in our family home, which is our family home and remains our family home. So when I'm looking after the children, I go back to the family home, and then when my ex-husband is looking after children, he does, and it was done primarily to support my son with his additional needs and to provide stability for them during the divorce. And that was the arrangement that we put in place. I then went to purchase, took my life savings basically out of the property, the 25% that I still owned within the property, took that money out so that I could purchase with a mortgage the place in Hove. And I took, advice on that, and I relied on that legal advice that I received that said that I was liable to pay the standard stamp duty. Subsequently to that, with all of the media reports that have been coming out, I took expert counsel advice on all of my affairs to ensure that everything was done proper. And that expert counsel said that the advice that I received was inaccurate because of the trust. I don't own the property, that is true. I only own one property that is mortgaged, like most people. But because of the nature of the trust that was set up by the court, that I would be liable to pay the additional stamp duty. As soon as I knew that that was the case. I have alerted and referred myself to the independent advisor on the ministerial code to ensure that they can look transparently at what's happened, and also contacted HMRC to say that there is additional tax owing on this and that I'm prepared to pay that and fully comply with the HMRC as well.
In your statement, Hen, it's a very long, detailed statement and it is extremely complicated. You say, I deeply regret the error has been made. I'm committed to resolving the matter and I have referred myself to the independent advisor on ministerial standards. Just 2 more follows up for that. Did you consider resigning over this?
I've been in shock, really, because I thought I'd done everything proper and I'd relied on the advice that I received. And I'm devastated because I've always upheld the rules and always have done and always felt proud to do that. I feel, you know, that it is devastating for me. And the fact that the reason why those confidentiality clauses are in place was to protect my son, who, through no fault of his own, he's vulnerable, he's got this life-changing, lifelong conditions, and I don't want him or anything to do with his day-to-day life to be subjected to that level of scrutiny, because it's his and my ex-husband it's not fair on them. Often my family are dragged in because of what my role is and what I do, but I try to uphold the highest standards, and that's why I've referred myself, so that the independent advisor can look at everything. He can look at all of the details of what's gone on.
I mean, I've known you for a long time and I know how robust you are as a politician. You're in the press all the time. I can see you're very, very upset about having to make this statement.
It's because it's my children, and I try and protect my children before anything else. I'm a mum, and my son's been through so much, and I'm so proud of how he's come through all of those challenges, and he's come through a lot. And he's an incredible human being, and he's incredibly inspirational, the way he goes about day to day and what he's able to do and how he overcomes those challenges. But that's his story, and me having to explain that and say that, I feel like it's not okay for me to subject. I feel like I should protect my children from that, not do that, and that's what I find really challenging. I think it's absolutely right that I am transparent and I uphold the highest standards in public office, and I absolutely believe that that is the case and that I've always intended to do that. But sharing personal information about my child, I think, is a real challenge for me. But the accusations that were levelled at me, and I wasn't able to say, and even though, you know, I did explain that there is a court order, this is not accurate, I have not set up a trust, I have not tried to dodge any tax, I have relied on advice, I have done everything that I felt was proper, and that, you know, the accusations that were levelled in the press was incredibly wild. I've got 3 homes, Rayner. I haven't got 3 homes. I have a family home that I don't own, that is to primarily give my children what they need to support them after me and my ex-husband divorced. It was a decision that me and my ex-husband made together to support our children, and anyone who's gone through divorce will know that the number one priority of having your parents in those circumstances is to provide for their children. And when you add a child who's got a lifelong disability and the challenges that he faced, then I hope people can understand that that's what we primarily try to do. And I've always tried to act in the highest of standards, and I'm devastated that I found out that the mistake was made, but it was made, you know, relied upon from the advice that I received from the lawyers, and it was a mistake, and a leading counsel has looked at that and said that, but it is a complex area.
You talked about how hard it was to disclose this. Was there a moment as a mum, not as Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, where you thought, I'd rather just quit this than have to actually explain about my son who I'm trying to protect? Did you think about just packing it in rather than having to do this now?
I spoke to my family about it. I spoke to my ex-husband, who has been an incredibly supportive person, because he knows that all I've done is try and support my family, and help them. And, you know, the pictures that were put, some pictures of my children were put up again in the media in the week that I was trying to spend some time with them. And that was incredibly distressing for my son, that those pictures were put up in the press. And I said, please don't put the face of my children. And it's really distressing for them because they don't want to be in the public eye. It's distressing that they read stuff about me all the time anyway, but, you know, that they've got used to that. But the fact that they were subjected to that, and that the fact that I knew now that all of this information, they're really upset.
Like, you did think about, should I pack it in for the sake of the family, but your family are backing you to come out today and explain this.
The number one priority for me and my ex-husband has always been to support our children and do the best thing for our children.
Can I ask you what the Prime Minister has said? You presumably have spoken to Keir Starmer about this. Do you have his full backing?
Well, Keir knows the circumstances, and he obviously knows about the challenges that my son has faced and the background to all of that. And Keir understands the circumstances, and my understanding of the process is that the independent advisor will go through all of these facts now and will give them to the Prime Minister.
Right, so you've referred yourself. You think you'll be cleared, presumably?
Well, I'm not prejudging that, but
Okay.
all I can say, and you've got the statement, is, you know, I relied on advice from the lawyers. I haven't set up a trust to tax dodge or anything of that nature, or any of these accusations that were made against me, and I can clearly demonstrate the circumstances of our family arrangements.
There's been so much noise around this already. You have faced accusations, you know this, of hypocrisy, because in the past you have called for Tory governments to build up resources to tackle tax avoidance. You said it was damaging our country in 2017. You said the public are furious with those who get away with tax avoidance while they pay. Some people will say, I know some people will say that's you, isn't it, now?
Well, I never ever tried to avoid paying. You know, it was very clear that my home is Ashton. I was very clear that Hove is a second home for tax purposes, and I've paid the premium for that. I am very clear that where tax is due, people should pay it, and I relied upon the information that I received from the lawyers at the time, which a leading tax counsel has looked at and said was inaccurate. So there was no dodging of tax. I didn't set up a trust to dodge tax. I didn't try and avoid paying. I relied upon advice. I took advice, and as soon as that leading counsel said that that advice that I received was inaccurate, I have taken all immediate steps to do the right thing, and that is the right thing to do. You should pay the tax that is owing.
Just to be clear, you've referred yourself to the Standards Commissioner, you've contacted the tax revenue and said you could be liable for more tax. Presumably you deeply regret this because of potentially the fallout for you. Do you think your position, Angela Rayner, even though you've explained it, do you think it's sustainable? Do you think you can carry on as particularly Housing Minister?
Well, I made a mistake based upon the advice that I relied upon, that I received at the time, and a leading expert has now said that advice was wrong. I think hopefully most people can see if you rely on advice given to you by lawyers and you follow that process, and then you find out that that process is wrong and that advice was wrong, I'm rectifying it at the earliest opportunity. People make mistakes, but I conducted myself in trying to do the right thing, and I hope that people can see that.
OK. Just final thing. Do you think your position is sustainable? Do you think you can carry on in the post with this around you now? Do you think it's really damaged your brand as a, you know, you're a hard grafting working class woman, you've worked your way up to the second most powerful office in the land, and now this could be construed as someone who has tried to dodge tax. Are you worried about the damage for you?
Well, I'm hoping people can, now I can set the record straight, and I've given those personal information, that people can see what's happened and can see that I wasn't trying to dodge tax or any of the accusations that were pushed onto me that I relied on advice from lawyers. That advice from lawyers was inaccurate. And as soon as I was made aware of that from the leading tax expert, who we asked to look at this, I am now taking all of the steps that anyone in those circumstances who rely on advice and that advice is wrong, I'm taking the steps to correct that. So hopefully people can see that there isn't any intention to deceive, to avoid, to be hypocritical in the way in which I've conducted myself.
OK, so legally you're referring yourself, but does it pass the sniff test? I guess that's the question.
Well, that would be for the advisor to look at all of the information that I've supplied to him.
That's the interview there with Angela Rayner. Beth's still with us, along with our duo for this evening as well. Keir Starmer's former political director, Luke Sullivan, and the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Baroness Saida Farsi. Luke, you obviously worked pretty closely with Angela Rayner. You know her. What do you make of all this?
Well, I mean, I think any of your viewers, having watched that, will just see her telling her human story about what's happened. Of course, there's a huge political potential ramifications of this. It's no doubt the headline is very, very bad. However, I think, when you listen to the explanation of what she said, of following advice, it comes through, it's deeply, deeply affected her. I think, in the answer she gave in the interview, I think it just comes through about why she did it. And, at the heart of this is she has a difficult family situation and she was trying to navigate that in a way to look after her son. And, obviously, at the heart of it, she's a human being. There's a family at the heart of it. But then, no doubt also she's the Deputy Prime Minister. And it's these two worlds coming together with the scrutiny she's under.
Do you agree with that? What's your take?
I mean, it's a really sad case. I've known Angela for many years, and the easiest thing would have been to stick the political boot in her today, and lots of my colleagues in the Conservative benches were doing that. And look, and we have to start with this premise that if you are in public life and you are a politician and you are making policy, then you have to not just be within the law, but you have to be within the spirit of the law. You've got to go beyond what may just be legal, and in this case, it's questionable whether it was or it wasn't. But she's currently being tried by the media. And I think what she has done, importantly, is refer herself to the Standards Commissioner. There will now be a proper process. She will have the opportunity to present the evidence that she says she has of legal advice. And I think if it turns out that she did have appropriate legal advice and she was advised that this would not be considered to be a second home because of the situation with the trust created for her child, then I think the independent advisor on ethics will say that actually this is just a genuine mistake and, maybe a slap on the wrist. I think the question for her will be, and I think this is where she may become unstuck, is if the legal advice, the questions she was asked, the advice she sought, the information she gave and the advice that was given, if anything around that area doesn't quite stack up, that's, I think, when she will have problems.
Beth, it's quite an affecting interview. Like you were saying earlier, you don't see Angela Rayner like that very often. But kind of taking that aside, politically, what's your take on this? How big of a problem is it?
Well, I think politically, there's a big question. I think none of us around this table know whether, as of tonight, Angela Rayner will survive as Deputy Prime Minister. That rests really in the hands of the ethics advisor, the advice that she sought, and whether he believes that she broke the ministerial code or not. And I imagine that the Prime Minister will follow his advisor's advice on that. So we don't know if she will survive. I think, I think in terms of the political fallout of it, it's undoubtedly extremely damaging for this politician, because even if she is exonerated and she stays in post, I mean, she just has a big target on her back now, and it will blunt her effectiveness, I think, as a political attack dog, as she has been on the Conservatives, particularly around issues around tax. And also she has been a big campaigner within the Labour Party for more wealth taxes. She has been someone that has advocated for people paying more tax on stamp duty or other wealth taxes. And I think that puts her in a more vulnerable position, that then she has this issue about not paying the tax. And I think, Luke, actually, you were very pertinent when you talked about these kind of political and personal worlds colliding, because normally we just see, you know, Angela Rayner as the ferocious political animal and operator, impressive operator that she is. And I think what you saw there today in that interview was where the personal has really come to the fore, and she's struggled with that. And I think she is under serious pressure now. And for someone that has controlled her political narrative and career so effectively, to be out of control, that must be a really uncomfortable feeling. But, I mean, it does rest now on the advice, and in a way it's beyond her control.
Beth, thank you for being on and for bringing us your interview this evening. We'll have lots more from both of you as well throughout the programme. And look, the story and the detail around the Deputy Prime Minister's tax affairs are pretty complex. You might have picked that up already. Sky's Paul Calso has been examining her account of what she claims was an honest mistake to see if it stacks up.
Angela Rayner says she got bad tax advice arising from what she calls complicated family circumstances. At the heart of those is a trust set up for one of her sons who has lifelong disabilities following what she calls a deeply personal and distressing incident when he was born prematurely. Now, in 2020, she and the family were living in the family home in Ashton-under-Lyne when her son received a financial award related to that incident, and a trust was established by the court. Angela Rayner and her husband agreed at that time they would transfer in time some of their ownership of the home to the trust. Now, in 2023, the Rayners divorced, but agreed the children would stay in the family home while they rotated in and out to care for them. At that point, some of their interest in the house did indeed pass into the trust. And at the start of this year, Rayner sold her final interest in the home to her son's trust, meaning she no longer had any financial stake in this house or any other. 4 months later, in May, she used that money to put down as a deposit on a new flat in Hove, bought reportedly for £800,000 with a mortgage. At that time, she said she was advised she was liable only for ordinary stamp duty costing around £30,000. But after recent media reports, she took fresh advice from a specialist tax lawyer who told her provisions in the trust meant she was liable for the higher rate, taking the stamp duty owed to £70,000. Now, she hasn't given any details, but if she has rights to live in that family home to look after her son, that might make it her main home for tax purposes. And HMRC's advice on stamp duty is even clearer. Parents are treated as owners of property owned on behalf of under 18s, even if it is held in trust. Now, all of that makes the nature of the advice she received, and crucially the information she provided, central to what happens next.
Did she go to, say, the lawyer who set up the trust, and they knew all the facts and they got the law wrong? If they did, it's really not her fault. Did she just ask the conveyancer who was doing the house purchase for her without giving them the background? Well, then it's Ms. Rayner's fault. Did she instruct someone else but not give them full details or not follow their advice? Then it's her fault. So it really depends.
Angela Rayner insists that this was not an attempt to dodge taxes or manipulate the rules. And given her son's circumstances, it's clearly personally difficult, certainly unusual, and definitely complex. Now, the advice that counts now is that given by the Stands advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus, to Sir Keir Starmer.
Paul Calso there. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up. Well, there's been lots of reaction throughout the day to Angela Rayner's admission that over her tax errors, opposition MPs are accusing her of hypocrisy and calling for her to go. Stay with us.
It's the country's #1 issue right now. Many are alarmed about their changing communities.
It's an invasion, isn't it?
I think that solution comes through dialogue, not ranting off.
We don't know who they are. I don't think that there's an issue.
But are the people who matter listening? We'll bring key leaders together to debate the crisis that's dividing the nation. The immigration debate on Sky News. Get the full story first.
hear that whistle and that crunch. We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Hello, welcome back. And of course, there's been reaction throughout the day to the row over Angela Rayner's tax affairs, including at Prime Minister's questions, where the PM defended his deputy.
The Deputy Prime Minister has referred herself to the ethics advisor. She has admitted she underpaid tax. So why is she still in office?
In relation to the Deputy Prime Minister, she has explained her personal circumstances in detail. She's gone over and above in setting out the details, including Mr. Speaker, yesterday afternoon, asking a court to lift a confidentiality order in relation to her own son. I know from speaking at length to the Deputy Prime Minister just how difficult that decision was for her and her family. But she did it to ensure that all information is in the public domain. She has now referred herself to the independent advisor. That is the right thing to do.
I'm not sure we would have heard all that sympathy if it was the Conservative Deputy Prime Minister who was being attacked. I remember when the Prime Minister said that tax evasion is a criminal offence and should be treated as all other fraud. If he had a backbone, he would sack her.
So that was the exchange at PMQs. Meanwhile, Reform's Deputy Leader Richard Tice has described Angela Rayner's position as untenable.
Anybody of any basic common sense and integrity would know that is not tenable. Morally, it's just indefensible, and she was so vocal in attacking opposing politicians when she was in opposition that she can't stand up and say, I'm the biggest hypocrite in the land. She has to offer her resignation to the Prime Minister.
So look, we've got accusations of hypocrisy from some on the other side of the Commons, and of course, to be fair, Angela Rayner was never one to shy away from making political capital about any perceived rule-breaking when she was in opposition.
There's only one rule with this cabinet, and that is that there's one rule for them and one rule for all of us. Now, we have a great week in store, but it comes after one where we saw the chaotic face of today's Tory party. They've had quite a year since we last met. The leader who lost to a lettuce, the Chancellor who forgot his own tax return and forgot to declare it too. Why does the Prime Minister need an advisor to tell him that this conduct is unethical? If this isn't a breach of the ministerial code, surely the code itself is wrong.
Well, look, let's talk to Luke and Saida again, shall we? I mean, is there a point there, Saida, that Angela Rayner was the first out of the blocks to point the finger if there was people made mistakes on the other side, or there was wrongdoing on the other side, and if you live by the sword, you die by the sword?
Completely, and I think this is the part of the accusations that she's going to find hardest to deal with. I mean, it's the part of politics I despise, this whole sense of Punch and Judy, that actually it's all about tribalism rather than being much more considered and thoughtful about these moments. And I think the point that Kemi makes, which is the most powerful point, which is if this had been a Conservative, Angela would have led that charge. And I think that is what she's going to find hard to deal with. But I also think that we need to be, what my position has always been is, let's look at what the facts have to say. And if we have a process, and we do in government, if you're a cabinet minister, you have a ministerial code to live by, and there is somebody who is an adjudicator of that ministerial code. She's referred herself to that. Let that adjudication take place. And if at the end of it a breach is found, then it will be for the Prime Minister to make a decision on that breach.
There's a quote in one of the Tony Blair books where he kind of talks about, don't go too hard in opposition, because you might find that when you're eventually in government, scandal will come. No matter what happens, it will come, and you might live to kind of regret it. Luke, do you think Angela Rayner is living to regret that?
I understand, and I completely agree with what you've just said there. She's one of the Labour Party's most effective political communicators. She's one of their best political assets, and she's made a lot of enemies. She has asked questions of people when they've had trouble And I think, what's admirable from her is the level of information she's put in the public domain. Now, it's absolutely right that she answers the questions to the ministerial advisor and provides the evidence that he requires, and we have a process that should be allowed to take through. But absolutely, she has held other politicians to a high account, and it's completely understandable. People are asking questions of what did she do and how did she act in this case.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it has kind of split opinion among commentators, among politicians as well, because you have people like Richard Tice saying that, look, she's being a hypocrite because of what she's done, but then there's others who are saying that actually Angela Rayner has previously been a prime target, for some of the opposition, some elements of the media as well. Earlier, we heard from Paul Novak, the General Secretary of the Trade Union Congress, and he said that he thinks there's what he's describing as a heavy dose of misogyny in how Angela Rayner is treated.
People do make mistakes, and it's important when they do make mistakes that they hold their hands up and we move on. But I would also say this. I mean, I think Angela Rayner comes under sustained coverage because she's a working class woman in a way that, frankly, Nigel Farage, leading members of the shadow cabinet, never would. I think there's a real heavy dose of misogyny when it comes to Angela. But as far as I'm concerned, the Prime Minister's got faith in her, and I think the country's got faith in her as well.
Do you think it's misogyny?
I think it's misogyny, but I also think it's class with Angela. I think she's always faced a lot of criticism because there's almost a sense of, you should know your place and you didn't get a certain kind of education and you speak with a certain accent and you've got a northern, and you come from a certain background. And yeah, there is a class issue. I think, when UKIP and people like Reform start having these conversations about Angela, they know that deep down she cuts through with the kind of people that they want voting for them. And there is a disdain towards people like her, that her having a trust, her buying a house, how dare she for £800,000. There is a sense of that kind of class war. But then you could argue, well, Angela plays that as well, right? Angela has had, she has made comments about the Conservative Party and Tories, and there has been an element of class in that. But she also, I think, is on the receiving end of quite a snobby class approach to her.
Yeah, you have seen that, obviously, in some of the coverage and some of the approach. But at the same time, if you don't pay enough stamp duty, no matter who it is, you could be, the biggest toff around and you're still going to be in trouble for it, right?
Yeah, and look, I think ultimately this is going to be the political battle to come. Would be a huge scalp, and Reform want her off the pitch as much as the Conservative Party do. And she is going to be, I think, as we spoke earlier in the programme, is going to be a difficult week whilst the advisor judges, and obviously we'll see how public opinion is.
Do you think that's
well.
why Keir Starmer is so loath to lose her as well? Because he's come to her defence, right?
I think as Keir, knowing Keir and, having the privilege of working very closely with both of them over a sustained period, they have got a personal, tight relationship and they are very supportive of each other. They've been through some really difficult times. This isn't the first time that, they were both investigated by the police over allegations. So, they have been through a lot. He's very protective. And I think, as he said in the PMQ's clip that you played, he has clearly sat down with her at length and listened to what she has done and explained her personal circumstances. And it's absolutely right, knowing how Keir is, that he would also, we've got a process and that's the right way to establish the facts, and that will come back to him and he can make a judgment.
But losing her would weaken the Labour Party.
Oh, no doubt.
And there is no doubt that, I've heard her speak to huge rooms and the way in which she engages people, and she appeals to an essential demographic, which is going to be a key component of what happens at the next general election. Yeah. So, Keir, might have a great relationship and all of that, but I also think the bigger picture here is that, the Conservative Party Reform recognised that should be a huge scalp, great political achievement for them if they got that, but the Labour Party also knows that should be a huge political loss.
And she's a huge part of the government's agenda, in terms of housing, the employment rights. These are big things that the government actually, despite it being a difficult first year, are making some real inroads in.
Really interesting stuff, really interesting. Well, of course, we heard earlier Angela Rayner talking pretty emotionally about her son. And the Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey, has actually come out in support of the Deputy Prime Minister as the parent of a disabled child himself.
It's right this has gone to the independent ethics advisor, and depending on what they say, Angela Rayner's position may become untenable. But I read her statement, and as a parent of a disabled child, I think we should all reflect on the challenges that she has been through. We all worry about what's going to happen to our children when we've died. And I can see that in what Angela Rayner has said today. I hope there's now a debate about that, about how we support children when their parents have died.
So you were talking earlier about how you kind of hate the Punch and Judy politics. I guess this is an example of the opposite of that, right?
Yeah, Ed Davies showing us all how decent politics can be done, you know, and time again, you know, he's been such an impressive leader of the Liberal Democrats, and the way in which he does manage to bring fact and evidence and thoughtful questioning at PMQs, and the way he continues to be quite principled in the positions that he takes. I mean, even the conversations that he's having about Trump at the moment and not attending the state banquet because he simply refuses to turn a blind eye to what's going on in Gaza, and holding the Prime Minister to account for that. So I just think that there is, we're at a time when populism is on the increase, where Yahoo politics, the quick, you know, kind of hit, your ever more performative politics is up there. It's just great to see steady, grown-up, thoughtful politics, and Ed's been an example of that today.
What do you make of it, Lee?
I thought it was extraordinarily classy, and I think, you know, you could see from your interview earlier, you know, when Angela was talking about her personal situation with her family, you know, you could hear in Ed's voice there, you know, his knowing how it is to look after a disabled child, and, you know, he still rightly asked some questions that she has to answer and that will be answered in the coming weeks. But it did show, I think, in a time where, you know, it's often easier to say resign before seeing the facts and let her process. It was a really good, you know, response, and all credit to him and the Lib Dems.
It feels like there's a kind of wider point here as well, though, because it's like the issue with what's happened here is the one rule for them, one rule for everyone else. Politicians have to abide by the law that the rest of us do. And if it is this hard to firstly to understand the tax system right, but also this complication of when you have got trusts or dependents or divorces that is parts of life and that lots of people around the country are grappling with, and many of them will not, you know, have to come up against HMRC in a difficult way. Is that the kind of message here?
I think there's no doubt that the tax system has become increasingly more and more complicated. And, you know, the one thing that it should be easy for people to do is to be able to pay their tax easily. Yeah. And the easier you pay your taxes, the less complex the tax system is, the easier you're more likely to pay that tax. But, you know, again, simplifying the tax system, it was under my government that most of these changes were made, actually, to SDLT and second homes. And the reason we did it, you know, the reasoning behind it was absolutely right to say that we cannot have, you know, a category of people in this country who can increasingly buy more and more wealth and not pay more tax when they're acquiring that wealth, because second homes, third homes are considered to be, you know, moments when you're acquiring wealth. This is a very different situation, because this is not somebody going off and buying a second home. This is a home which is no longer her home, her final home and her permanent home. This is in trust for a child. This is the consequence of a family breakdown and divorce, and she's now gone away and bought her home somewhere else.
I guess, you know, lots of people going through divorce have this issue, right?
Completely.
And they can't have like a family home and then individual homes from the couple who are divorcing. These are what people are grappling with all the time across the country, right?
But to be fair, the only reason she's able to do this is because of the payout that was made to her child for the injury that he suffered, and because there was a trust that could effectively buy Angela and her husband out. Exactly, that's really important. So this wasn't just lots of wealth that they had and they're able to go off and do this. Yeah, had that situation not occurred and had a divorce happen, I'm absolutely convinced that they would have had to sell that house. But this is a house that is now owned by a trust based upon money, which is neither Angela's or husband's, which was awarded to the son. So I think that's really important to understand the complexities of this particular relationship.
Thanks both of you for a very nuanced conversation about this very complicated and big political day for us. Still to come on the Politics Hub. Police are streets, not tweets. The PM says forces should focus on serious crime after the comedy writer Graeme Linehan was arrested over anti-transgender social media posts. And Nigel Farage raises the case in Washington.
Sky News that she wants to stay in her job as she exclusively reveals that she underpaid the stamp duty on her new flat on the South Coast. Also ahead tonight, I'll be speaking to Sir Chris Hoy and Dermot Murnaghan about the support the Olympian gave the former Sky presenter following his cancer diagnosis. And I'm going to be joined in the studio by the Indian adventurer whose trip around the world was halted when thieves stole his motorbike in Nottingham. All that and much more on the UK Tonight at 8.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on. They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser.
Oof. OK, nothing to see here. Drama over. Full stop. Anyway, we'll get to that. She will be mortified.
Because she's the first female chancellor.
I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
All alcohol products, not just wine, will have labels warning of liver disease and the link to fatal cancers.
Is it crazy? It's an industry worth around €14 billion a year. That's why Italy sees this Irish plan as such a threat.
It's always instructive and occasionally entertaining to hear what Donald Trump has to say on the issue of Brexit.
She's got her own way of doing it, that's okay.
The job takes me to every corner of this island.
The rioting stemmed from a horrific daytime stabbing attack at a primary school in the city centre.
The scale of the rioting and the destruction it caused is pretty much unprecedented here in Dublin.
Jerry, any comment on the judge's decisions? Do you feel vindicated, Jerry? This is the end, the somewhat chaotic end, of a 52-day trial.
Micheál Martin could be set to head back to government with the Taoiseach Simon Harris.
Are you confident that you can now return as Taoiseach?
I'm cautiously optimistic and excited.
A mystery press conference hastily called. Leo Varadkar strode out and didn't disappoint.
I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today.
The people here sometimes feel they're somewhat neglected by the Irish government, to the extent that this place is sometimes known as the Forgotten County.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks, but none have ever been found.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland. Sky News, get the full story first.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. I just want to bring you some breaking news and bring you some live pictures now coming into us from Lisbon, where at least 3 people have been killed and many more injured in a crash on the funicular railway. That's Lisbon's Gloria funicular railway, very popular with tourists. It derailed and crashed, leaving around 20 people hurt, and 3 have now been confirmed to have died. You can see there, of course, the emergency workers at the scene in Lisbon trying to find out what happened and to help, of course, those people who have been affected by that derailing of the funicular railway in Lisbon. We'll bring you more on that story, of course, when we get it. But in the meantime, I wanted to tell you about a special programme here on Sky News next week. We just announced that next Wednesday at 7 p.m, we're going to be hosting a live immigration debate in Birmingham. It's going to be presented by my colleague Trevor Phillips, and the debate will then feature representatives from the government, the Conservative Party, the Lib Dems and Reform UK. There'll also be a live audience to put questions to them. And of course, we want you to join us if you would like to be part of it. All the details are available by scanning the QR code on your screen right now. So scan that QR code to be part of our immigration debate with Trevor Phillips. Now, the head of Britain's biggest police service has said that his officers are in what he describes as an impossible position and should not be caught up in toxic culture wars. It comes after the Father Ted co-creator, Graeme Linehan, was arrested by armed police at Heathrow Airport over a social media post about transgender people. The case has also been raised by Nigel Farage in the US to members of Congress today at a hearing on free speech. Tamara Cohen has this report.
The Irish comedy writer Graeme Linehan, famous for Father Ted and The Fast Show, stepped off a flight from the US on Monday to find 5 armed officers waiting for him at Heathrow Airport. This is what happened next.
You're under arrest. Holy I don't believe it. I'm under arrest.
He recorded that exchange, in which they tell him it's over 3 posts on X about transgender people, and that he's arrested on suspicion of inciting violence. In one of the posts from April, he writes, "If a trans-identified male is in a female-only space, he's committing a violent abusive act. Make a scene, call the cops, and if all else fails, punch him in the balls." Linehan wrote online that he was taken to hospital, where this picture was taken, and that he told police his tweet was a serious point, made with a joke and not a call to violence. The issue has angered free speech campaigners, and Keir Starmer was asked about it.
If you don't support speech you don't like, you don't support free speech.
I've been clear throughout, we must ensure the police focus on the most serious issues and the issues that matter most. And we have a long history of free speech in this country. I'm very proud of that and I will always defend it.
The Metropolitan Police Commissioner Mark Rowley said in a lengthy statement defending the officers that they had no choice. He said, "I don't believe we should be policing toxic culture wars debates, and officers are currently in an impossible position. I have offered to provide suggestions to the Home Office on where the law and policy should be clarified. If agreed," he said, "we could be ready to test new approaches quickly, within a matter of weeks." Nigel Farage made hay out of it in Washington, D.C., where he was invited to address the House Judiciary Committee.
The way the British government have gone about this, frankly, is a sledgehammer to miss the nut. And we finished up with a situation where a foreigner, somebody with an Irish passport, coming into Heathrow Airport is arrested by 5 armed police. And that could be an American executive. So whichever way you look at this is huge overreach.
He raised the case there and that of Lucy Connolly, who was jailed over a tweet she posted during last summer's riots.
At what point did we become North Korea? Well, I think the Irish comedy writer found that out 2 days ago at Heathrow Airport.
How police assess alleged crimes on social media has been under the spotlight. Now, across the political spectrum, there are calls to make clear where the lines are. Tamara Cohen, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, that for our shorter feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the Daily Mirror columnist Kevin Maguire and the former First Minister of Northern Ireland, Baroness Arlene Foster. Right, let's talk to Luke and Thaida, shall we? Luke, what do you make of all this? North Korea?
I mean, I think anybody watching that will just think this is not a country we recognise in terms of the allegations being made. And frankly, one of the contributions, and I saw his interview on Sky earlier on, where he was essentially calling for sanctions against the UK in terms of some of the things around freedom of speech. Now, that is not in the country's interest, and I think it's absolutely incredible that Nigel Farage, who wants to be Prime Minister, would go to the United States and would tell a story about this country, which I don't think is recognisable to the people living here. There should be a nuanced debate about the case that was raised here, and I think there's that's a completely legitimate place. But we've never had. We have to have a place where the politicians are having a reasonable debate and actually also putting some reasonable, where there are proper policy changes that need to be made, they should put them on there.
Is there, I guess, an argument that what gets people's backs up is they look at cases like this, 5 police officers, and they think, well, my bike got nicked or my phone got snatched out of my hand and no one did anything about it?
Yeah, and that is a very easy kind of story to tell. But in this country, we've never had absolute free speech. There's always been restrictions on speech, what we can say, how we can say it. Talking about criminal cases was something we were talking about earlier. We have all sorts of legislation in place to do that. But you know what I find really shocking? It's really quite gut-wrenching to see what should be a serious member of Parliament, an elected politician, Nigel Farage, go across to the United States to trash the United Kingdom in the way that he does, to talk this country down, to say the most appalling, almost comical things about how unserious he is and his views of this country, and to be calling for financial and diplomatic sanctions on our country, the impact of which will be felt by ordinary people in this country. I mean, that is the most deeply unpatriotic, disloyal thing for him to be doing. Since when did we become some sort of an extended state of the United States for him to be going across there, bleating, somehow moaning, complaining and taking a knee? This has really got to stop. And we've got to call this out. You know, these people keep projecting themselves as somehow saviours of this country and patriots, and yet they're not. All they do is put this country down, set communities against each other, set this country alight and damage the future prospects for all of us.
Luke?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very, fair. And, look, there is a proper debate to be had here about policing, about, where the line is, but that is not what Nigel Farage has sought to have today.
OK, and thanks both very much indeed, Slade and Luke, there on our panel tonight. Big news story, of course, with that admission from Angela Rayner to Beth Rigby. That's it from us tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Up next, it's the UK Tonight with Sarah J. Mee, and of course at 9 p.m. you've got The World with Yalda Hakeem as well. But I will see you right here tomorrow night at 7 p.m.